Vampire.
That's a great face. Well, hello, belieflings.
Well, hello.
Nice to see you both again.
It's good to be back in the hole.
Sorry I don't sound like my normal self.
Jeremy is an imposter today.
Yes.
Yeah, he's going from sounding like he's dying to sounding like a much more confident man.
What?
He went through puberty over the last week.
Yeah, it's been a rough time lately, and I've been fallen ill, and now my voice has changed. But it was temporary, I'm pretty sure. I'm just sick. It's the winter.
I'm pretty sure. It'd be funny if it just stayed like that.
It stays like this. I sound like the guy from Caravan to Midnight for the rest of my life.
That'd be funny.
I like that guy.
He's great.
He likes you too.
He's got good stuff. John Bell. I think that's his name. Anyway,
Anyway.
he's not here today, but we are, and so are sky whales.
Sky whales, sky creatures, sky critters, as some call them. This is going to be fun.
Monsters of the wind.
I was surprised how much there is to this idea. You know, we live at the bottom of an ocean of air, gentlemen.
That's true. Atmospheric ocean.
Think about it.
Yeah. If you think about the ocean and how much life is down there, and, you know, we're not even close, I think, to finding all the different things that exist.
Right.
And the atmosphere is just another ocean.
Well, what's interesting about that, I think, which makes this such an intriguing idea, is that the atmosphere of our planet is 5 million times the size of our ocean.
Really?
5 million times the size.
That's insane.
That's crazy.
We're just like tiny creatures on the bottom of a gigantic ocean.
We are the bottom feeders.
Yeah, exactly. We're the bottom food. We're like the plankton. Well,
No,
plankton's
we're
not
not.
even on the bottom.
There are stories of attacks.
John, you mentioned that earlier before we got started, wondering if they were violent or if there was, you know, because we talked about
whales?
that. The idea of sky whales sounds like we like the term sky whales, sky creatures, sky critters, whatever.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of sky whales because they sound friendly.
Right, yeah.
Because
Right.
whales are friendly. But yeah, sky whales sounds friendly. So I like that term. But there are accounts of attacks, right, Chris? There are of things that may have come down and done their dirty deeds upon the people of Earth.
There's a surprising number of reports, which is really interesting. It goes back decades and all over the world.
And we're talking about something that has its genesis in the same time of the early UFO phenomenon of like the 60s and 70s, where there was a competition of ideas where some people believe they were biological creatures living in the sky. And I think different reports point to those different things, right?
I think like anything, you have the beginning of a phenomenon, or at least the beginning of recognition of a phenomenon, and then you have ideas that come together. And then at some point, you know, we were born into this world of believing that UFOs are most likely mechanical devices that are piloted by extraterrestrials. And I feel like as the years have gone by, there is a growing number of people that are considering, you know, it might be more likely that they're interdimensional.
Right.
The interesting thing is when the whole phenomenon began, there was a competing idea that these were biological life forms. And a lot of reports around the world really point more towards some sort of atmospheric life form.
Right.
Than a ship piloted by extraterrestrials. They were conscious, floating, amoeba-like, giant, massive creatures in the sky. More like jellyfish than sky whales.
Yeah,
as
I
fun
know.
as sky whales are, it's more like a jellyfish. The most of the
Or
sightings.
amoeba, right?
Right. Some of the accounts, though, there are fins involved. So
I'm sure there's all kinds. That's the thing too. There's with an ocean this large above us in the ether, you can have all kinds of potential organisms that live up there.
right, and it does sound fantastical. It does sound like, how could that exist in? Yeah, obviously,
Why don't we see them?
Why don't they
right?
come down? How can they stay aloft? These sorts of ideas, and we'll get
They'd
into
have
those.
to be low density, like we talked about.
Right.
Like not even fully physical almost.
Right, low density and
Gaseous?
Yeah.
gaseous.
Well,
So one thing I wanted to mention real quick, I've never heard about this before.
Right.
I remember when you first talked about it, it seemed very far-fetched, you
Right.
know? But the way you're making it seem is like this has been around for a long time, this
Yeah.
concept, and that there's a lot to it. Like you said that at first you didn't think that you were going to even be able to do a full episode, and now you could do like 4 episodes on it.
Oh yeah, and one of the guys who spearheaded this, Trevor James Constable, fascinating guy, and his work ties into like weather manipulation. Anyway, what was my point there? Would you ask me, John?
Sky whales?
Sky whales, yes. Interesting thing is, you know, we're talking about that competing ideas, and then eventually you forget about these ideas. It seems so outlandish now because these reports are never discussed because they're dismissed out of hand, because the leading theory is that extraterrestrial spacecraft is what is lighting up our skies at night.
Right.
You know, but in the beginning of all this phenomenon, these reports were taken with much consideration because there were so many reports of these biological atmospheric creatures. So that's why when I first heard about this idea and was looking into it, I was like, man, there can't be much on this because you never hear about stories like this. But when you start looking, you're like, there's tons of reports. They just don't get shared often because
they're so wackadoo.
Right. Compared to the status quo or the constant paradigm of, you know, these are manned extraterrestrial craft and not biological. So it seems like such an out there idea. But at one point it was right there with everything else.
I feel like a lot of UFO sightings and the attributes of those sightings are biological seeming, like the ones that we hear a lot about where there's like this orb, this big undulating pulsing light in the sky that seems kind of conscious, and then you have a smaller one coming out of it. Right? Like almost like giving birth, you know, like a life form. But they get lumped in, well, it must be some weird technology because that's what these things must be.
Right.
So we just label them as like flying saucer type UFOs when in reality, like, we don't know. They're just an unidentified flying or maybe swimming object.
And there's an incredible story that's exactly what you just described in the Soviet Union. And it's a crazy story, and we're going to get into it later in the episode along with some other stories, but it describes that exact thing, basically where this thing comes down out of the sky. At first people think it's a missile. It's during the Cold War because it seems like it's on fire, but then it starts emitting these crazy sounds, almost animalistic sounds, and then it stops and hovers, and it's on almost like it's on fire. And then it unleashes these golden tentacle-like things and puts holes into people's apartment windows. This is like documented.
What?
This is, right? You think you would have heard of the story.
How high up was it?
It was estimated to be about 300 feet in diameter. Wow. That's how big this thing was.
No, how high off the ground?
It came from what they initially thought was outer space because they see this thing coming down almost like a star. It does a spiral pattern, then it looks like it's on fire. But then it stops above this town, this city of like 130,000 people.
And what year was this?
It was during the Cold War.
Okay.
But it unleashes these almost like golden rays, described almost as like tentacles by the population there. People said they were waking up, people who hadn't even seen it because it's 4 a.m, but they were woken up with a feeling of impending doom.
Weird.
And this thing is unleashing these things, and it's going through car windows and apartment buildings, and it's leaving. We'll get into this story later because it's fascinating.
Yeah.
That is very bizarre.
But it relates right back to your account because one of the parts of the story was this thing comes out of it and goes around and then reemerges back into this thing.
Yeah, you hear that all the time, like of these things being spotted where things like an auxiliary entity or craft comes out of the larger one and then oftentimes goes back in. They seem to communicate. They move in like, you know,
right,
like flocks.
It seems like a mix of biology and technology almost.
That's funny you say that because
it is funny.
Cyborg, sky whales.
Well, so many of these reports talk about these jelly-like things, and they're reports of them having like a mica-like shell that you can't break when they're on land, like you can't get through it, or when they bleed, they're bleeding a sort of a metallic sort of foam. So there is this sort of technology meets biological
That's interesting
organism.
You hear about those things from time to time where there's like this weird pink gelatinous stuff that's found having fallen on trees and on ground. It's covering like a section of a town or something. You ever hear about those stories where they're unidentified?
Star jelly.
Oh, really? There's a name for it? Yeah, that's exactly what that reminds me of. Like these anomalous events where you have this something coming down from the sky. Yeah, maybe they're coming from these creatures. That's why we only see it from time to time. Like maybe they're not a natural attribute of the atmosphere itself, but of entities that live up there.
Right.
Maybe something's wounded or you know, something.
Yeah, this happens from time to time where you get unidentified sort of substances that are organic that come down and they cover people's homes or trees or whatever.
Yeah.
And they look like a jelly. And they've had samples. National Geographic scientists did samples during one of these experiences and took samples of it, and they couldn't confirm what the substance was. Their best guess was that it was regurgitated frog ovaries.
What?
But they couldn't confirm that theory. It's just strange, like, you know. The theory was that they were regurgitated by vultures that were eating dead frogs, maybe after a rainstorm where a lot of frogs were out.
And they all flew over and barfed them out right on top of the...
Right. But then they take samples of this stuff. They're like, we can't identify the substance, but it looks like it might be frog ovaries.
Well, there have been reports of frogs raining at times.
Oh, yeah, for
that's
sure.
also true.
Mm-hmm. Which can be explained by,
water spouts.
Yeah.
Right.
But of course, because we don't believe in there being any organisms out there other than birds that are flying temporarily. There's nothing that lives in the atmosphere. In a sense, then whatever's on the ground must be explained by the mainstream or whoever as something that came from the ground.
Right.
So what goes up must come down, and that's what it has to be. But maybe it doesn't.
Yeah, and it's interesting because there's so many sorts of things that have come down, called skyfalls that come out of the sky over the years. That's a big thing in like Fortean research, especially back in the day before we started explaining everything with like it's most likely a cyclone or something. But you've had blood fall out of the sky, like large amounts of blood on places. Ugh. Could be, like obviously the theories have been, some animal was taken up by a UFO and maybe was eaten by something, or not a UFO, but like a tornado. I don't know, a UFO in my head. Yeah, but in this new perspective of could there be organisms living in this area that's 5 million times the size of our ocean, of which we are the bottom of? Could there be things that are living and digesting things up there? Maybe people. Maybe this explains some missing 411 accounts,
Cattle mutilations.
Like the story you talked about on the last episode where that portal came, it looked like an orb that came and just ate this person. Right. What if that was one of these things? Because one of the theories about these things is that they exist in an invisible form until they go to feed or if they're wounded or something. And then that's when you get these reports of anomalous orbs of light that start to show up in the atmosphere or come down and drop tentacle-like things or are found on the road.
I'm not going outside anymore.
It is kind of creepy to think about. I was thinking about that the other night. I was on the back deck and I was looking up and thinking something could just reach down and snarfle me up.
Snarfling on up?
Then we could do an episode about it.
That's true. You guys would become really, really successful because you'd have a story to tell.
It would be awesome if we had like iPhone video of it, and it's what blew us up into success.
But of course, it's like blurry.
We did lose one of our
lost
hosts,
brother, but we had to sacrifice one.
Goodbye, Jeremy.
That's what must be done.
It's like it's worth it. Share my story.
Do it for me.
But yeah, speaking of fear of the sky, this is just kind of interesting little factoid because I had this. And I still do get it sometimes, but when I was little, I used to have this fear of being sucked up into the sky or a fear of gravity just turning off.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you
like
ever
on a clear night
up into the sky and you're like, what if we just fell
just
the other way?
And that feeling of, like you would just fly.
Yeah. There's a term for that, which I came across in my research. It's called casadastrophobia. Casadastrophobia. Look at it. You try to pronounce it. It's on the...
I think everyone's looked up and probably thought that once or twice in their life. Like, what would happen if gravity just stopped working?
Yeah. I mean, there are people that don't leave their home because they have that fear. I feel like it must be connected with, is it agoraphobia? That's the fear of open spaces. Oh, yeah. Like the guy who did The Scream. Remember that famous painting, John? The Scream by, was it Edward Munch or Munich or something? But he was agoraphobic. So that was him being outside terrified of these large expanse of space. It's interesting. Anyway, and yet another reason to be scared of the sky.
Yeah.
So one of the earliest ufologists who kind of was spearheading this idea, actually was his sort of conception, was Trevor James Constable. And he was a firm believer in this phenomenon. And he actually started developing ways of capturing images of these things that are invisible to the naked eye, unless, feeding.
Right.
But he used infrared technology to capture images. And John, if you look at the layout there, that's one of his images. No one could see this until he took a picture.
Wow.
It certainly looks like a jellyfish.
Yeah, we'll have this in the show notes, guys. Check out the episode page on our website.
And for those of you who are familiar with the classic NASA Tether incident, which we will touch on later, there are infrared images of these jellyfish-like creatures that look almost identical to the things that are seen floating around the NASA Tether in that video. So we're going to get to that stuff later.
Yeah, we talked about that before. Oh, in a Patreon episode, the Tether incident. Yeah, we'll get into that. This picture, by the way, guys, this is the one, if you're looking at the images, there's a gigantic rock, a bunch of people crowded around.
It's an older picture.
Yeah, and this jellyfish type looking illuminated thing.
So that's with infrared?
Mm-hmm. It's funny, Chris, this looks like
casadastrophobia.
You know, Contact in the Desert, John, and Stephen Greer, and he does those.
I met him.
I know, that's a great story. Stephen Greer is one of the leading UFO researchers, controversial figure out there.
Yeah, he allegedly would give briefings to sitting presidents about the UFO phenomenon. And he talked about being able to, and claims to be able to call these. And it's funny because he
carries on the tradition of the fellow you're talking about.
Right.
Because that's what he used to be involved with. And I don't know if you have the information on that, but I can jump in on that later. But
sure,
it was in the same kind of, it might have been the same place in Contact in the Desert, in that area, where this fella who was taking those photos and developing this technology and got into cloud busting and all that, he was doing the same thing. He got involved with a fellow that we'll talk about later, helped him develop like a psychic kind of ability that he didn't want. It sounds crazy, but basically that's one of the aspects of it was this, he called it like a seance type contact with UFOs.
Yeah, it is kind of like a UFO seance where you summon them almost.
Right.
We'll touch on that later, specifically about, what's the fellow's name again?
Trevor James Constable.
Yeah, Trevor. He's definitely a fascinating figure. He has connections with Wilhelm Reich, who developed orgone therapy.
Is that cloud busting?
Yeah, that's where that comes from. Orgonite is that rock you can create or buy. It's really not a rock. It's an amalgamation of I think polymers and epoxy and stone, certain kinds of crystal or something. But it's used for cloud busting, to break away clouds in the atmosphere or to form clouds for rain.
Right, which is what Constable got into later in life.
But you know where orgone comes from, the name? It combines the words orgasm and organism. Because he believes it's let's see, I'll read this here.
It's missing
orgone.
Doesn't combine it.
From orgasm and organism. That's where the word is derived for.
It's the root?
It's a term that he coined for biological energy that he said others called God. Wilhelm Reich was a very controversial figure. He was very out there, but I think he definitely discovered some stuff that was, I think, stuff that connected to Tesla's idea of the ether.
Right.
But that's kind of the beginning of the cloud busting idea. And the cloud busting connects because that fellow you're talking about, that Trevor Constable guy, he was into cloud busting. He'd worked with associates of Wilhelm Reich in the desert to do cloud busting, to build rain clouds, to bring an end to drought in areas. And he believed that doing so would agitate the creatures living in the sky, because it was affecting their habitat.
He believed that things that we've developed since basically the 40s, radar, things like that, are affecting this environment for these organisms, and that might explain why we're seeing more and more of these reports of these things coming down, being sick, dying, which we'll get into, or eating people, maybe.
Yeah, they're angry because we're
wonder what the chemtrails would be doing.
Maybe that's killing them.
Oh, maybe that's the whole reason for the chemtrails, man.
Keeps them out.
Boy, have you guys seen lately? There's some of the days that's just been unbelievable. Anyways, that's a whole nother subject.
Take off your tinfoil hat, Sean.
Yeah, whatever you think about chemtrails, I think we can all agree that
contrails
it makes the sky ugly and it ruins a beautiful day.
That is absolutely true. You want to talk about pollution?
Yeah,
it's a good start.
And depression and mood, anxiety. Yeah.
Every time there's a beautiful day in the morning, and then you see it start to happen, you're just like, well, goodbye, blue sky.
Yeah, and anyone that doesn't believe that the trails are connected to the actual formation of just gray, hazy days, just watch a time-lapse video or just stand outside, for an hour.
Anyway, this episode is about sky whales.
Yeah. Anyways, we should take a quick break, don't you think?
Yeah, let's take a break, but when we get back from the break, I want to get into these really interesting stories.
Okay.
It's pretty fascinating, and they're legit accounts. They're not creepypasta. Yeah, John, do you have a stinger you wanted to play for a patron?
Yeah, this is for Walrus or Chris. If you guys want more of our shows, we're releasing another episode every time we release a main one, and that would happen at beliefhole.com.
Patreon. You get double the episodes.
If you go to beliefhole.com, you can click Patreon button.
Yeah.
But so what we're going through now for people that are just starting to join the show is we play these audio stingers that are just kind of like these fun little thank yous for people that have signed up for the Patreon.
It puts you in the hole.
It's kind of like our thank you. They're kind of original. And this first one is for Walrus, and it relates to sky whales.
All right. Ooh, I can't wait.
Hello, Walrus. I am a sky whale, a very low-density being. I just wanted to thank you for signing up to be a patron.
It's got some issues.
Now I'm off. I'm going to leave slowly. I'll see you in your dreams, Walrus.
That's kind of terrifying. That sky whale sounded like Seth Rogen at the end with that laugh.
Kind of reminded me of the
Sky Rogen.
What are they called?
Skeksis?
The ones that were like
Dark Crystal.
Reminds me a mix of that and Falcor.
Yeah, that's a good mix. Yeah.
Man, I want a sky whale for a pet.
They're fun.
I was definitely there on a dark hill looking at the sky with this creature coming down when I was listening to that. Very realistic. That's probably exactly what they sound like.
Well done, John. I enjoyed that escape in my brain.
Yeah.
Cool. Sky whale country.
Hope you liked it, Walrus. Chris, thank you so much. Thank you, all you patrons who have signed up. If you are interested in getting a stinger, that's the Thunder Buzzard tier.
And for those of you who've already signed up at the original amount, you're still going to get yours, just so you know.
Yeah, well, we sent out emails about that, but thank you guys so much. If you are interested and you're interested in getting bonus episodes every time we release a regular episode, just go to patreon.com and search Belieful, or go to our website belieful.com and click on the Patreon button, and you will find us.
All right, we'll be right back after the break.
Pick up.
Hi. Thanks for calling the Belieful
Thank
hotline.
God.
Got a spooky story?
I do. It's all real. They're outside
No one's available to take your call, but you can leave your story at the sound of the tone.
No.
Thanks for calling.
They're outside right now.
Have a spooky
They're outside. No. Do you have a spooky story? Don't wait until it's too late. Give us a call. Belieful.com.
I think we're back.
I think we are too. Welcome back, guys.
We're back, and we've brought the sky creatures with us.
The sky jellyfish, I guess, would be a more accurate term, right? Sky gelatinous friends?
Yeah,
or enemies?
For most of the encounters that are experienced, yeah. More of a jellyfish type creature, more of a, that kind of thing.
Right.
Less of a whale.
That's whaley. That's
It'd be
really
fun.
disappointing, frankly.
I know. And not to say they're not out there, but, there's no evidence.
That's true. We are on the very bottom of this atmospheric ocean that lives above us. What did you say, 5 million times the volume than our Earth's oceans?
Yeah.
And that's insane.
Yeah, it's
so
crazy.
It's hard to fathom.
Yeah.
There's for anybody interested, there is a graph we'll have in the show notes that really gives you a good example of where we are, where planes fly commercially, and then the miles surrounding that. Here's where we get, the highest we get is right here. And then there's all this.
Wow.
Yeah, this picture will be in the show notes, guys. It's from, I think it's called The
Living Sky.
LivingSky.com, which is based off of a book. Chris, you got some stories coming up?
Yeah, I thought we could start this section of the show off with a good story.
Now, these are true encounters of these sky creatures.
Allegedly true, yes.
Jellyfish, amoeba, whatever they are living in the sky.
Yeah, reported by real living people. So that's always a benefit. I mean, you could...
As opposed to what?
Oh, it's supposed to like anonymous reports?
Right, or like creepypasta fiction stuff,
Subreddits and...
Yeah, I mean, again, like our last episode we did, you can always listen to a story and be like, well, that guy is full of shit.
Right.
But we know at least he was a guy, and he said this with his mouth or wrote it with his hand.
It was written down that he had existed at one time.
Right.
Yeah.
So the first one I want to do is probably one of my favorite stories, and this comes from Trevor James Constable's, one of his books, The Cosmic Pulse of Life, which was published in 1976.
I've heard of that.
That's
a good year.
Yeah, that's another cool thing. That was a great year. That's another reason why I like a lot of these stories is because they are older accounts, and I feel like we live in an age of,
Wonder.
Fake stuff all the time. Wonder.
No, that's
a good way to
not
look
quite
at
the
it.
word.
I was going to say cynicism and fraud, but
Well, yeah, just like overhyped up everything.
Right.
Sensationalism.
Sorry, when you said we live in the age, I just thought of that Crystal Method song. In the age of wonder.
In the age of wonder.
The crystal. I think it was about like, wasn't that about like the Skeksis? Dark Crystal.
Wow, Jeremy.
whoa,
It
bring
all
it back
comes
in.
back. That connects to the Skeksis you were talking about that inspired your voice of your whale creature.
It all
Dark
comes to
crystal.
synchronicities
See, it's all connected,
floating around,
John.
man.
This is God giving you little tickles.
Tentacle tickles from the sky beast. Okay.
John did not like that tangent, apparently.
Okay, so the first one I want to, Jerry, do you want to read the first one?
I would love to.
I think you'd be good at this.
Sure, why not?
So this one comes from an American named Don Wood Jr., who reported this to Trevor James Constable, who was doing this research. And I think this is a fascinating story. He was a pilot, and he had a strange encounter with a sky beast. Maybe the most descriptive, the most visceral, and potentially the hardest to believe because it is so rich with detail.
Okay.
You want to give it a go? This comes from Trevor James Constable's book, The Cosmic Pulse of Life.
An American named Donwood Jr. got a terrifying look at a couple of these critters. He saw them in full physical density and in light reflecting negative polarity as a result of his hobby and interest in flying. Mr. Woods states,
I must write to you of what happened to me in 1925, which I think solves most UFO reports. I've never told this to anyone, but can get a signed affidavit if needed. 4 of us were flying Old Jenny's, a type of biplane, over the Nevada desert. We landed on Flat Mesa near Battle Mountain, Nevada. The mesa is about 5,000 square feet and the walls are too steep to climb unless a lot of work is done. We wanted to see what was on top of that flat place. We landed at 1 p.m. While walking about the top of this place, we noticed something coming in for a landing. It was about 8 feet across and was round and flat like a saucer. The undersides were a reddish color. It skidded to a stop about 30 feet away. This next thing you won't believe, and I don't care, but it's the truth. We walked up to the thing, and it was some animal like we never saw before.
What in the hell is this?
It was hurt, and as it breathed, the top would rise and fall, making a half-foot hole all around it like a clam opening and closing. Quite a hunk had been chewed out of one side of this rim, and a sort of metal-looking froth issued. When it saw us, it breathed frantically and rose up only a few inches, only to fall back to earth again. It was moist and glistened on the top side. We could see no eyes or legs.
So just real quick right there, fascinating. So this thing, it's got a chunk taken out of it, like something else.
Oh, interesting.
Up there,
had he bitten
snagged a bite from this thing as it's lying down there.
It sounds like a mix between like a jellyfish and a whale, like with a breathing apparatus on the...
Or like a stingray
Yeah.
or something. Yeah.
Interesting. Should I continue?
Yeah.
Okay. After a 20-minute rest, it started pulsating once more. We stayed about 10 feet away. And so help me, the thing grew as bright as all get out, except for where it was hurt. It had a mica-like shell body. It tried to rise up again, but sank back again. Then we saw a large round shadow fall on us. We looked up and ran. Coming in was a much larger animal, 30 feet across. It paid no attention to us, but settled itself over the small one. 4 sucker-like tongues settled on the little one, and the big one got so dazzling bright you couldn't look at it. Both rose straight up and were out of sight in a second. They must have been traveling 1,000 miles an hour to get so high so fast. When we walked over, there was an awful stench, and a frothy stuff the little one had bled looked like fine aluminum wire. There was more frothy, wiry stuff in a 30-foot circle where the big one had breathed. This stuff finally melted in the sun and we took off. So help me, this was an animal. I've never told this before as we knew no one would believe us. I only write this now because this animal would be one big 30-foot light if seen at night. I don't expect belief, but I simply had to write.
Interesting. What do you think, John?
I don't know.
I like it. I think it rings true.
Obviously,
some of the details.
it's very fantastic sounding.
Yeah.
But it coincides with a lot of these other accounts where there's obviously animalistic aspects to it. There's sort of a metal, frothy aspect to it. Allegedly why this man sent in this story to the author was because, he sees this thing and it really does explain a lot of the UFO experiences because it's something that is translucent until it gets really bright.
Right.
And so his statement was like, at night, if you saw this up in the air, you would see this 30-foot wide disc of light and think that's a spacecraft.
Right. And we see that all the time.
Right.
I mean, I don't, but we
do all the time.
We do all the time. Yeah, there are reports all the time and videos and photos of these things, glowing saucer or even like blimp-shaped things.
Right.
Those have been kind of disproven, but the saucers in the sky, the round things that are glowing, seem pulsing.
Yeah, who knows what's up there?
Then that pulsing, I think you're going to touch on it later, but it reminds me of that tether footage we talked about before.
Yeah, which we will get into.
Those things hovering around, yeah. No, but I think that makes a lot of sense. I like the detail about the glowing when it was trying to lift off, and all of it would glow except for the place that had been attacked. The wound didn't glow. I thought that was interesting.
Well, it's like that's where it's damaged.
Right. Yeah, and so the life force isn't in it. And it just reminds me of the description of things we see in the ocean, like octopus, squid, jellyfish, things that can camouflage the invisibility. Like if you have something flying or swimming in the ether above us that can become translucent to match its surroundings, camouflage.
Right.
It's essentially invisibility.
Yeah.
And I've heard stories, the connections with like random deaths of birds, inexplicable flocks that will fly into buildings and stuff because there's some kind of radiation in the atmosphere. People have suggested that these creatures put off this radiation.
Right.
When
Well, then you get a lot of UFO encounters, close encounters, where you have symptoms of radiation poisoning, like burning, itching, damage to flesh, same types of things you get from aquatic jellyfish type thing. So it's just an interesting correlation.
Yeah.
And also, this story reminds me of the one we covered on the Men in Black episode with the Maury Island incident, where you
Maury
had
Island,
that magma type stuff, metal magma falling from the sky. That's what something, you know, it would appear similar sort of thing. If a creature, alleged creature like this was wounded, it would be dripping a sort of metallic magma.
Oh, that's interesting.
You know?
Oh, yeah. We should definitely get the was it the director that reached out to us about the Maury Island
I think the producer
of that documentary? We should reach out to them and have them on.
Yeah.
That would be an interesting question to raise to them about the actual incident.
Definitely. Well, yeah, that was the first one I wanted to share because I thought it was just a fun one.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about.
Is that the only
poor little
fun
guy?
one?
Poor little creature on the.
Poor little babe.
His mom has to come down and save him, or maybe it was the predator that took the chunk out of him, just coming to finish the job.
Just coming to wrap him up and eat him for later.
I hope it was his mom.
Me too.
It probably was. Poor sky whale.
So I'd like to talk about some of the historical accounts. There's a really simple one in 1870 where Captain Banner and the crew aboard the Lady of the Lake witnessed a circular cloud that also had sort of compartments to it.
Like skin folds?
Yeah, and it had a hook-type shaft extending from it.
Ooh.
And they referenced it as being a sort of organic life form that they watched as it traveled against the wind over the ocean as they're on this ship in 1870. Just an interesting thing. And you'll hear this in other accounts later on with science teachers, police officers, where it's initially they think it's a cloud moving against the wind until it starts to do something more animalistic.
Ooh, yeah.
I got a couple really short little bits later we'll talk about. But the next one is another fascinating incident. And John, I thought maybe if you wanted to read this one. This one's known as the Crawfordsville Monster. This is another older one, 1891. But an interesting case. And there is a skeptical argument at the end, but a skeptical argument that I find pretty hard to swallow.
At best.
Okay, here we go. On September 5th, 1891, the Crawfordsville Journal reported that 2 ice delivery men sighted a strange phenomenon that hovered in the air above their location, describing it as a horrible apparition that filled them with dread. A similar sighting was reported by a Methodist pastor and his wife. The Crawfordsville Journal described it as about 18 feet long and 8 feet wide and moved rapidly through the air by means of several pairs of side fins. It was pure white and had no definite shape or form, resembling somewhat a great white shroud fitted with propelling fins. There was no tail or head visible, but there was one great flaming eye. And a sort of wheezing, plaintive sound was emitted from a mouth which was invisible. It flapped like a flag in the wind as it came on and frequently gave a great squirm as though suffering unutterable agony. According to the interviews conducted years later by Crawfordsville reporter and 14 Society member Vincent Gaddis, hundreds of residents observed the phenomenon on the following evening, with some claiming they could feel the monster's hot breath as it swooped over them.
That's I would not want to be underneath that.
Red flaming eye too. I mean, definitely, this was sort of the era of, very audacious claims made in newspapers to try to get readers and sell papers.
Quite an imagination with the flapping in the wind.
Right.
This white shroud. And
white shroud with fins.
It's weird. It sounds so vague in a way. I mean, as a creature, you think that you would, if I was a newspaper man, I'd say something that was, like a monster.
If you were fabricating the whole thing, you mean?
Yeah, I would make it somewhat connected to something we could relate it to in reality, like a dragon or something. But to be this flapping white shroud with compartments and a flaming, it's so specifically odd,
right?
And not specifically
it's
monstrous.
Interesting for sure. I mean, there was a skeptical argument, and this is sort of so the Indianapolis Journal repeated the September 5th sightings, as did other newspapers across the country, including the Brooklyn Eagle, whose article later attracted the attention of early paranormal investigators Charles Fort. Our guy we talk about. The Crawfordsville Postmaster was deluged with mail, and reports of sightings generated both ridicule and a number of believers. 2 local men, John Hornbeck and Abe Hernley, quote, followed the wraith about town and finally discovered it to be a flock of many hundred killdeer. The Crawfordsville Journal suggested that Crawfordsville newly installed electric lights disoriented the birds, which caused them to hover above the city. The birds' wings and white underfeathers likely resulted in misidentification.
That makes sense, yeah.
Right?
Like that big flaming eye.
There. Look at that. That's a killdeer, by the way. They're the cute little birds that run around puddles and stuff.
Oh, yeah, long legs.
Yeah. So a flock of those somehow are misidentified as a giant red flamed-eyed monster with big white flaps. And I mean, I can see like the amorphous form of like a flock of birds, kind of like undulating. But to have a giant red eye, to hearing what they described as like painful breath or unimaginable sounds uttering from it, like that's not a flock of...
I mean, bird flocks do make some, but they're bird sounds. I mean, everyone, there's that many people witnessing this and none of them had experience with a flock of birds before.
And again, it reminds me of like that sort of idea of like temporal elitism where it's like anybody from a time further before us, they're idiots. They don't know, they can't identify
We're the
stuff.
most advanced now of any.
Right. This was only 100 some years ago. It wasn't that long ago. So it's an interesting story. Definitely strange.
Yeah.
Did you see the picture, John, of the bird?
Yeah. I mean, there's real no way. I mean, you could show any bird and it's like, it's a bird.
Yeah, except for the giant red-eyed...
It doesn't matter what bird it is.
Except for the giant red-eyed pigeon.
Yeah, I don't think it would really make it turn into a
flaming-eyed, white-shrouded, compartmentalized sky beast.
Well, I would say sometimes you do look up at the sky and birds do pretty crazy things in flocks.
Yeah, but you always know that's a flock. Once you've seen one, then you would not misidentify that for a flying, flaming-eyed beast.
I mean, I could see, like, they did say, you know, it must have been... At least part of the sighting was at night because it said there were electronic lights that were newly installed. So maybe they saw this thing from underneath and it was lit from below.
And reflecting off their white bellies.
But still the smells and the sounds and the,
It flapped like a flag in the winds. I mean...
Still the red eye.
There's no red on that bird.
They said how many people? Did they say like thousands of people witnessed it? Or how many was there? Did thousands of people exist back then? I thought it was a lot of people. It just seems strange that so many of them would identify this as something unidentifiable.
What is they could feel the monster's hot breath? What does that mean?
Well, apparently this thing was swooping down towards the streets of this town.
Yeah, I don't think birds do that.
It's obviously the energy caused by the friction of their wind against, or the wings against the wind.
It's a pretty weird story.
Yeah.
Not for the belief hole.
As unbelievable as some of these stories are, you know, we touched on sort of some possible physical trace evidence earlier when we were discussing things like star jelly.
Gelatinous secretions.
So the question again, you know, that people would ask when you're discussing giant monsters that live in the sky, why aren't we seeing evidence of these things?
That's what everyone asks me when I talk about it with people.
Right?
Yeah, right next to the impeachment.
When you're at the podiatrist.
They had a panel on CNN, I think, about this the other day.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I heard Wolf Blitzer saying, where are these evidence of these sky creatures?
What can we expect from these?
What should we know about the angel hair? Anderson?
So yeah, where is the evidence, right? Well, it's funny because when you start to look at the phenomenon through this idea of these organic beings, then some of the evidence starts to make sense. Maybe a lot of these things aren't alien piloted craft, but maybe they're organic beings.
Evidence misattributed to physical craft.
Like angel hair. So angel hair is strange shreds of filament type things that are left behind at scenes of UFO landings.
Oh, that's why they...
all UFO? Not all. But
not all, but some. When they
these type of UFOs or just other
in general
ones too?
It's a form of trace evidence.
Right.
Oh, that's interesting. So
the material visually resembles sort of jellyfish tentacles. And if you look at our show notes, I'll have an image here where it's comparing jellyfish tentacles to these angel hair. And did you guys see that?
It's pretty identical, really.
Yeah.
What are they made out of, this angel hair?
Are you going to read that line?
Oh, I was just kind of like summarizing, like looking at it.
Well, it's interesting. It says sometimes, this is kind of what I was asking.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sometimes what may be excretions drop from the sky, body parts, flakes of flesh, and rains of blood.
Right. Like we were discussing earlier, the sky falls.
Some UFOs shed strange filaments called angel hair. This material visually represents jellyfish tentacles, and that's what that is.
Yeah.
But rains of blood, that's kind of what you mentioned before, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, before this would be explained away by something having to do with weather phenomenon, you know?
Okay, that's interesting where it says...
Flakes of flesh.
It usually sublimates quickly.
It's a good band name, Flakes of Flesh.
You hear a lot of stories like this where there's a common theme is the gelatinous material, some of the trace evidence and stuff dissipates. They have it in a container. There's an early one in the 80s where the police officer had a gallon container of this stuff, or a liter of it. And then by the time the creature had dissolved, it actually dissolved in the jar itself.
Right. You hear this a lot when you do have these sort of blob jelly-like encounters.
Yeah.
There always seems to be, if they don't make it back up into the sky, they dissolve pretty rapidly.
Also says here that...
Which you could argue is convenient, but at the same time...
no evidence. No body, no crime. It's interesting here, too. It says chemical analysis of a few samples has found the same minerals found in marine jellyfish.
Right, yeah.
So they could be connected. Oh, that's another thing, too. That point that there is no real clear distinction between the sea and the sky, the earth and the sky, and the atmosphere above, that it is a constant system, undulating and connective. What if these things can, like here of the USOs?
Right, exactly. Unidentified submerged objects.
Right, and you have the trace evidence of this angel hair pointing to minerals found in marine jellyfish. They could be a relative, right? There could be some biological connection between the jellyfish of the ocean or creatures in the ocean and the creatures of the ether in the sky.
Right.
What above is so below.
As above, so below.
As above,
that was
so
all
below.
about sky jellyfish.
Actually, let's discuss this quick encounter because it relates right to what you're talking about. So there's two encounters that I came across in different resources, but they allude to this idea that there is a connection between the water and the sky with these creatures. So this story I found in the Almanac of the Infamous, the Incredible, and the Ignored by Juanita Rose Vialini.
In 1975, Tom DeErkel, a science teacher in Oyster Bay, New York, glanced up at the sky as he was entering his car.
Well, that's weird.
Hovering over his house, a basketball-sized cloud floated back and forth across the peak of the roof, changing in shape. The cloud then appeared to breathe in and spew out a stream of water at Tom and his car, leaving them both soaked. The cloud vanished. This took place in Perth, Western Australia, around 12 months ago now. I am only just reporting it after seeing similar reports coming in.
Interesting. That's weird because the one I'm about to read is from Australia.
I know, and the two other stories I think that are not the story you're about to read that I found are also from Perth. And the one related to this, real quick, it came from that book we referenced before, the Best of 40 Times. But I found this and it just seemed to relate so much to the story John just read about the science teacher. An active mystery cloud appeared over Matotiko Island, New Zealand, on June 4th, 1978. According to a story in the Taupo Times, Mrs. Christine Dudley, her husband and family watched its antics for an hour as the black cloud swooped around Lake Taupo. She said it moved at high speed, continually changing shape, and sometimes dipped down to touch the water's surface before shooting up again. But the cloud was still visible sometime after sunset. Quote, "It was a little frightening," said Mrs. Dudley. But it's funny because in the story John read about the science teacher, this thing regurgitates this liquid all over him, and after tests were done, turned out to be water.
Yeah.
Right? And then in this story, unrelated in New Zealand in 1978, you have this cloud moving against the wind like those sailors saw in the 1800s, and this cloud dips down and drinks water from the ocean, or what appears to be drinking water from this. And I'm sorry if I'm getting those pronunciations wrong of Taupo.
So you're piecing together two different accounts, one of this thing spewing water at a man,
Right.
and another of a similar creature encountered that's drinking water from a bay or
Right.
lake. And you're basically saying that this could be the same creature.
Yeah, it's
and
interesting.
That's interesting. You made a connection,
They
Chris.
made a connection. But it's funny because, we're hearing a lot of stories out of Australia, New Zealand, and Nevada is a lot of a high concentration too. But the researcher we mentioned earlier, Constable, he's from New Zealand. So I wonder if he had an experience out there at some point, and that's what got him along this track. I'm not quite sure of the origin of his fascination, but yeah, interesting. I think the connection there is interesting.
Yeah, definitely. There must be a lot of stuff going on around Australia and New Zealand. This was kind of interesting. So this comes from thelivingsky.com that we'll have in the show notes, but I thought this was pretty compelling. This is on feeding and hunting.
Oh.
Some jellyfish are farmers hosting photosynthetic algae. However, most jellyfish and squid are high-level predators that use a variety of hunting techniques. UFOs seem to attack each other, targeting similar or different UFOs. They seem to attack animals. Thousands of reports of cattle mutilations describe strange lights hovering over the fields of the victims. Dead animals and even people are unexplainably found in the tops of tall trees. That's kind of creepy and interesting.
Predator.
Reminds me a little bit of Missing 411. UFOs attack vehicles. Some have followed cars for miles, bumping against them and flashing bright lights.
Yeah.
Definitely sounds like a predatory kind of
Right.
thing.
It's interesting you start looking at it from this perspective.
Right. Here's from a quick account that mentions that. In 1988, a mother and her 3 sons drove frantically along an Australia desert highway. The glowing object landed with a thump on top of their moving car. It whooshed a foul smell like decomposing flesh. The mother reached out her window and touched its spongy body. Then the object lifted their car right off the ground. Luckily for the family, it dropped the car, bursting a tire.
That's so funny because there's an account just like that with a police officer where an object like that came down light in the sky. Then it came down with some tentacle things and started to pick up the car.
Ugh.
So this happens,
And
apparently.
I've heard earlier in this podcast so far today, we talked about that smell of decomposing flesh.
Right.
There being some sort of organic material. It's interesting. These definitely seem to be representing a similar entity.
Yeah, for sure. Crazy.
It's all real.
The more I looked into this, the more I was like, am I actually starting to believe in sky creatures that exist? Like,
You always have.
well, in my heart, I always have.
To
But
me-
my brain is starting to agree with my heart.
To me, it's completely plausible. I mean,
Well,
there's
you believe in everything.
Well, no, that's not true.
Pretty much.
Yeah. No, I'm open to everything.
There you go.
But I don't believe in anything, really.
It is scary, though, how this just starts to make sense a little bit with all the different UFO phenomena, all the stuff we talked about with Missing 411, the invisibility stuff, things
Right, the
people
cloaking,
being found in trees,
camouflage.
and the relationship to cattle mutilations and UFO craft or sky creatures.
Right.
It could be a feeding situation. And again, that was something that Constable had touched on. That was one of his ideas that could explain cattle mutilation stuff, especially if you consider that a lot of that started happening after we started doing a lot more with radio waves, radar, disrupting their
Oh, they-
environment.
Sorry, there are UFOs. You always hear about them coming down over missile silos and absorbing energy from military
Shutting down
bases.
a
And yeah,
launch or something.
right. And there's this idea that if these are entities, that they may be feeding off energy,
It's so funny, man.
shutting things down, landing near power plants and absorbing. They're seen and witnessed in these areas, and then power grids go out and cars shut down. Could those be like little treats when, like in Close Encounters, when the car shuts
Yeah.
down, like little
bag of potato chips.
yeah, little electric snacks,
Yeah.
for these things to keep going.
Electric Snacks. That's a good band.
Oh, I
name.
like that one. George's coming all kinds of good. Let's just quit the podcast and start a band.
Start a bunch of bands.
Yeah, and we should go to break soon. I did want to mention one more thing though before we go. The synchronicity stuff has just been wild with this episode.
I know.
Wild. We had so many things that
Disgustingly
have popped
crazy.
up with sky whales.
Oh yeah, I was listening to Chill Step.
Yeah, recommended to you. It was a sky whale
playlist.
chill step. So many things like I've been putting off watching the sci-fi series The Expanse. Got to the 3rd season and it's all about this alien life form that's discovered somewhere and it starts to create a giant sky, half mechanical, half flesh jellyfish, just like these things on Venus. It's almost like they were reading into
Venus.
this, and then it feeds itself by nuclear fusion or power,
Right.
like you were just talking about. But it's almost as if they went by some of the research that Constable had done, and even what Carl Sagan talked about, possible living on Venus.
I was going to say,
giant squid.
don't you have a clip for Carl Sagan talking about these things that could be living in the gases of
Yeah,
Venus
it's
or another
just an
planet?
interesting anecdote, but it's just funny. Like so many of these seem to pop up when we are looking into these topics.
Yeah.
Eventually, it's like, oh my god.
so personal too. It's hard to
It's like,
explain.
it's like dreams. Like no one cares unless it happens to you.
Yeah, it's
you
hard
know?
to explain how amazing they can be sometimes.
And how
Visceral it feels.
importantly,
Right.
like it's very, they're very unique to the
very
individual.
personal. But when they happen consistently over and over again in your life, you get to a point where you're just like, okay, is this the Matrix?
Yeah.
Or are we living in some sort of a dream?
You know, I get the argument that like, oh, you're just seeing this stuff and you're seeing these patterns because you're starting to focus on a topic. But the thing with that is, I don't think that I've seen many sky
Right.
jellyfish things in my
It's a rare-
life.
I mean, I've never
to
even
see like
heard
a bunch
of it
in a row.
until we started talking about it like a week or two
Right,
ago.
we started looking into it, and then Jeremy's thing with the sky whale stuff. 2 things I'd watched on TV happened to have sky whales or sky jellies in it, and this the
Sky
one.
jellies.
This one's
Yeah, I don't think there's all that much content out there that even
Exactly.
is related.
You see like recommendations for movies for, you happen to hear a commercial about something.
Right.
A lot of the stuff now is just fed to us based on like what we're talking about and interested
Right.
in. So that's the
That's
technocracy eating our brains and replacing fate with manufactured synchronicity for profit.
so. Well, before we go to break, did you want to do a?
Yeah, we're
stinger?
going to do, this is Nicole Desiree, our good friend Nicole.
All right.
Thank you for being a patron.
John, this idea came from the fact that Nicole is a tarot card reader. So we thought it'd be fun to do sort of not quite tarot, but I mean you'll get the
It's a
reference.
seance sort of
Yeah.
situation.
Lock your doors. Draw the circle.
We are gathered here tonight to communicate with any spirit or being that would like to communicate with us. Are there any spirits that would like to send a message? Any spirits at all in this room right now that would like to communicate and deliver a message?
Okay.
I give you permission to use this vessel as a means to deliver your message.
I'll never do that.
Now is the time. Show us that you're here.
Is she for real? Oh shit. What's happening?
That's it, yes. Come forth and tell us your name. Tell us why you're here. Give us answers. What is your name being?
This is crazy!
Dear God.
It is I, the Great Belief Hole Podcast.
Nice.
I would like to deliver a message to a young woman named Nicole Desiree. I, being the great and powerful being that I am, would like to thank Nicole for her long-term patronage. She is a very generous young woman, and it takes much to humble such a great spirit such as myself, the masterful Belief Hole. If anyone else would like to sign up, you can definitely go to beliefhole.com and hit the Patreon button, and that'd be great. That is all. I leave you now.
I love that he plugged himself.
Yeah,
That was great.
Well done. Is that... Oh.
that's in.
Creepy, mysterious
It's the
ending.
great and powerful belief hole sounds a lot like the alien from our Patron commercial.
Well, I think
I leave you now.
Yeah, I think that I leave you now is
Yeah,
what,
Something that he says.
Right.
Yeah,
I like the personification of the belief hole into like a entity.
that was your idea.
That was my idea.
That's why
I
you
didn't-
like
I was
it.
going to take credit for that. I was just going to say I liked it.
Yeah. No, that was really good, John.
Yeah, it was good. I liked all the cynical people that are
Yeah, it
attending
was
this
just like
seance in the
just like a
background.
group of young people that just didn't believe it.
Yeah, come on, lady.
It's very creepy. By the way, you kids at home, do not try to summon the belief hole or any other entity.
You can summon us by sending an email or a Facebook message.
But yeah,
Well, we're going to take a break. When we get back, we're going to wrap up the episode by covering one of the coolest encounters and terrifying encounters with these jellyfish-like UFOs in Petrozavodsk. Not sure if that's pronounced correctly. So in the 1980s, during the Cold War, or the warmish Cold War, we're going to cover that, and then we're going to touch on that Tether video, and that'll pretty much wrap up the episode. But stick around, because this is some of the best stuff in the episode.
and I want to mention here real quick, this next break, we're probably going to drop a little preview of the upcoming Patreon episode that we'll be releasing after we release this.
Yeah, what are you going to be talking about, Cher, in the Patreon episode?
It's going to be on you guys heard of the Illuminati card game?
I've heard it referenced, but I don't really know much about it.
It looks fun. It looks fun to play.
Is it like predictive programming
It's
sort of thing?
steeped deep in the idea of predictive programming. A lot of predictions inside that game, allegedly.
So this is more conspiracy, less
Oh
paranormal.
yeah. Oh yeah. Any thing with the word Illuminati in it is
Right.
either conspiracy or a piece of clothing from Jay-Z. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. We'll play a preview here coming up, guys. So if you like it and you want to hear some more, go to beliefhole.com, click the Patreon button, sign up for the expansion pack tier.
$5 a month.
Only $5 a month right now, and do that if you're interested, and you will get an extra episode every time we release a regular episode.
Yeah,
So-
if you do love the show, you're really only getting half of the show nowadays.
Yeah.
Because we really do just as high intensity episodes for patrons. And
High intensity.
honestly, like the past couple patron episodes we've done, they're kind of my favorite of the season so far.
Yeah.
At
Way to
least
sell it, Chris.
At least the
Yeah, they're pretty
the
good.
Skinwalker.
The
Well, yeah,
Skinwalker's
Skinwalker's pretty great.
Last week's was pretty delicious.
and Mikkel and Bembe, I gotta say.
we can be a little more chill, a little more
And we're warmed
ourselves.
up too. They end
Yeah.
up being the second recording of the day, so
Might crack a beer open for the second recording, and so if you guys want to have some fun with
help us keep going, because this is a lot of work. We love doing it, and we want to keep growing and reaching more people. So
Absolutely. Want to do this full time for you
Support
guys.
what you love.
Put out more shows for you guys. So hit us up at believable.com.
all right, we'll be back after the break.
So when I first saw these cards, and you guys might be familiar out there with them, the basic idea is there's this card game out there, and a number of these cards seem to predict certain events in our history. Major events, including assassinations, catastrophes, everything that you might consider some hidden cabal, Illuminati elite would be behind controlling for whatever
Twin Towers?
purposes. Twin Towers, thank you. That's a very
9/11.
important one.
Pentagon.
9/11, Pentagon. And again, there's a lot of ways you could explain these cards.
Right.
But you can't ignore the fascination with them. Anyone who looks at these is going to be like, that is bizarre. In this context, he's actually said that he believed he was in contact with entities at one point.
Oh, interesting.
And he was involved with, it sounded like, the work with Crowley and that kind of stuff, and potentially contacting entities and that sort of thing. And he said, he admitted later it might have been hallucinations potentially, but he believed he was in contact at the time. So he is involved in some of those things. And if you do get information from the other side, and we know that there are these mischievous, or we believe that there could definitely be these mischievous entities, these things.
Right.
Who knows what ideas you have that you're presenting.
You may not even be aware of.
Right. You know, his books captured the minds of the game creator. And the game creator went on to create this game. And the game itself has some pretty fascinating imagery.
Right. There could be a puppet just pulling all these strings, some force.
Right. And that's what a lot of people do argue is it's more of a spiritual, metaphysical, other
regardless of what the original author meant, you know.
I think everyone has that feeling at a certain point. If you pay attention to enough things, it just seems that things are not right.
Right.
You know, how does it get this way?
Absolutely. And the skeptics would say, oh, well, that's the sign of a weak mind, where you're subjected to conspiracy pareidolia, you know, where you look for patterns and you blindly follow them into the dark, you know.
Right.
And now it's everywhere. Like, I have a close friend that has a daughter that just bought a pair of basketball shoes that has the all-seeing flaming eye on the box of the shoes.
Yeah.
And it's like...
Is it in a pyramid?
Yes, it's a pyramid and then the all-seeing eye.
What's the brand? Is it?
But it's like, you know, she's an 8-year-old girl.
Well, that's...
But how much of that is like, I'm a brand, I want to make money, I'm going to use this super popular in hip-hop culture, I want to put on my shoe, more people will buy it.
I mean, we have to look at the questions of the influence of these icons and symbolism throughout time. Why is it still around? Why are there these things that hold favor for all this time? And that's, you know, that clues a lot of people into...
Why is it on the dollar bill?
Why is it on the dollar bill? I mean, that links back to the idea of like, is there a group behind the scenes? And this would obviously point to some level of involvement with the Freemasons, because it's Freemason iconography and symbolism. But we know that the founding fathers and the symbolism on the dollar bill and where that comes from. But this goes way back, right? This is where the paranormal connects to the cult and the conspiracy. The shadow people, the dogmen, these entities that feed off energy and fear, adrenochrome. And then we have dark stories and whistleblowers on the elite doing similar things. There's this cross connection, if you want to believe in that dark side of this cabal running things from behind the scenes, that it might not be Karl Rove and Dick Cheney. You know, it's a deeper connective tissue that is maybe
puppeting people
from another place.
Yeah.
Influencing people, for sure.
Yeah.
We're back.
And we're back, guys.
Glad to be here.
Hi.
Hope you enjoyed your break.
Come on, get down off your sky wheel.
Remember that one time, Jeremy, you told me to have a good shower?
Oh, yeah. I lived in infamy.
Yeah, for a long time.
Have a good shower.
I'm sorry,
Like,
such a weird thing
hey,
to...
brother, have a good shower.
I looked up to you back then.
This was years and years ago.
You were my older brother hero, and I was like, hey, I'm just having such a good time. You invited me to Canada to hang out with you while you're going to school for sound design.
That was way before that.
No, that's when it was.
You remember?
Yeah, I remember that was in your apartment.
That was in Canada?
Maybe I said it to you more than once. I think it's customary to wish your older brother a good shower on days where he might need it.
That was when I knew you were a true man.
Thank you. I know. I've grown since then. I no longer wish people silly blessings.
It is customary. It is customary to wish people a good shower in Petrozavodsk.
What is that, Chris?
Oh, you guys know.
Did you see that face he just made?
Super like mischievous.
That was so cheesy.
I know, that's why I did it.
The I'm so clever face.
Petrozavodsk is where that experience with that terrifying giant jelly-like fish creature happened in the 1980s.
Way to tie it back in, man. Is that true that they really do have a customary shower blessing?
I mean, they might. I hope they do.
The reason that was so funny is because me and a couple other friends used to be like, your brothers are so nice. It's weird.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we are nice.
I know. But
they're like, because you're a dick. But your brothers are so nice.
No. I mean, you were like over the top
friendly people.
Yeah, you are. But back then, I mean, it was like this joke, and I was like, you're never gonna believe what my brother did to me today. He wished me a good shower.
That's hilarious, man. It's funny because I worked I've worked at several pizza places as a pizza locational engineer, delivering pizzas.
Pizza locational engineer.
Great on a resume.
The one place I worked at in Westerville, Jet's Pizza. One guy came up to me finally, and he was like, finally, I don't know if he'd been building this up or not.
I hope he comes up and talks to me.
He's like, don't take this the wrong way, but are you gay? I was like, no. He's like, are you a pastor? I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, you're just so nice. I was like, you know, I did what was asked of me. I was friendly, but I didn't like overly talk to people or
Did you wish people a good shower? Did you wish people good deliveries?
No, I didn't talk to people much. I mean, I smiled, you know, maybe I smiled like a gay pastor. I don't know. It was weird.
Pastor.
But I was told that I looked like the guy from Walking Dead.
Unrelated.
Well, he was a badass, so I feel like that kind of balances it out.
Was he? He fought slow-moving, non-real creatures.
One guy came up to me and was like, you remind me of the guy from Walking Dead because you're obviously a leader. And
You're obviously
and you're so nice.
I want to be with you in a zombie apocalypse, you gay pastor.
That's a great story. Great story.
Have a good shower.
Anyways, back to Sky Jellyfish.
Let's hop on our Sky Jellies and head on over to
Petrozavodsk.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
The report I'm going to read is from Michael Hessman, and he was a German journalist and author. In the late 1980s, he became known in Germany as an author of several books on UFOs and extraterrestrial visitations on Earth. This initially came out in a local paper, and then it caused such an uproar that there was a Russian investigation. And this report we're going to read here comes from Michael Hessman's account of this entire event. It happened on September 20th, 1977. Early risers in Petrozavodsk, the capital of the Karelian Autonomous Soviet Republic, saw a bright light suddenly appearing amid the clouds at about 4:05 in the morning. The star-like light came nearer and descended in a spiral trajectory and soon looked like a ball of fire. It then reduced its speed and finally hovered for about 6 minutes in one spot. If anyone had not noticed it before, they noticed it now, for it made a terrible noise like the howling of a siren. The howling stopped and the object started moving silently towards the town. Soon it looked like a reddish-orange hemisphere surrounded by a bright zone, in which there were many points of light-like stars that twinkled and disappeared. The light began to pulsate. A beam of light came out like a telescope from the bottom of the object, vertically downwards, followed by a second, less bright beam. After a time, both the beams disappeared.
During the next few seconds, hundreds of thin rays of light, like thin arrows, were showered upon the Earth. People who had, until then, watched the spectacle fascinated, now broke into a panic. They ran around the streets, throwing themselves to the ground. Some workers in the harbor thought it was an American nuclear attack and shouted, "This is the end!" TASS correspondent Nikolai Milov, who interviewed hundreds of people soon afterwards, said, "People looked as if they had suddenly become sick. They gave the impression of being mentally disturbed. People who had been sleeping said that at this moment they had been suddenly awakened and had an unpleasant feeling. Some suffered from nightmares and depressions. Most of them said that they had felt electric currents inside themselves."
The thing now looked like a big jellyfish with golden tentacles, shining in beautiful colors. The white glow around the hemisphere had now shrunk to a shining ring. The beams of light came down to Earth in a slight curve. They drilled thousands of holes in the asphalt and in window panes. Some of the people estimated the diameter of the object to be about 300 feet. They said that it came down, closer and closer, and finally hovered above the harbor. By now it was shining so brightly that it hurt the eyes to look at it. Then a smaller and brighter object in the shape of an electric bulb detached itself from the jellyfish and flew over the roofs and between the houses along the street. Some of the people claimed to have seen this bulb returning to its mothership and disappearing into it. A doctor said that while he was looking at the object, his car had broke down. The air was filled with the smell of ozone.
Oh, there it is, that smell.
The thing finally moved over a lake and burned a red hole in a bank of clouds and disappeared into it. The whole show had lasted for about 12 minutes.
Pretty intense.
Yeah.
I don't know how I've never heard of that account.
When was this again? Not
1980s.
No, what?
Yeah.
It does remind me of the Mare Island incident.
What were the little beams of thingies?
Oh, the tentacle type things are coming? These golden...
Did they say thousands or hundreds?
Yeah.
Hundreds of thin rays of light. Did it hurt anybody?
Yeah, so that's the thing. It came through and apparently it burned holes in car windshields and apartment building windows and a lot of glass. I didn't find any reports of it actually killing anybody.
Although,
but it was making people sick, apparently.
At the time, the Russians were pretty adept at hiding unfortunate accidents.
Yeah, like and they probably wouldn't have told anybody anyway, because it could have been an attack or...
Right. And that's why they put out this big investigation, because they were certain something had happened. And they wanted to make sure it wasn't an enemy, like the Americans.
Thousands of people saw this?
Yeah. The city was 180,000. It was a highly populated area that this thing came down over. It was 4 a.m, so, less traffic than normal. But yeah, after this, a bunch of people had written to the authorities asking, is it safe to leave the city? Is it safe to travel? And all these letters were eventually confiscated by higher officials from all these authorities because they wanted to silence this entire event.
Right.
Further references to the topic were forbidden. But yeah, they did have this report. They did have this investigation. So I thought this part was interesting. Vasil Sakranenko, the publisher of the magazine Technique and Youth, who had good connections with government sources, said, quote, "The Commission of Academy of Sciences has found that the holes in the stones and window panes give the impression that the glass has been melted. The holes are the size of a coin. The window of a factory in Petrozavodsk, perforated in such a way, were sent to Moscow for analysis. The results of the analysis were given out only towards the end of 1981. And that comes from Dr. V.G. Azaza during a lecture. So we'll link to this study, and we'll link to...
so this sky fish is dangerous.
Yeah. This one specifically. Although, yeah, I didn't see any reports about actual deaths, but who knows if they kept that secret. No. You wouldn't want to, like the cosmonauts, who burned up in space, you don't hear about, like the first woman in space allegedly, or they think because they heard those cries.
Yeah, sad story.
Those sort of
radio communications.
Radio pirates that were picking up signals. 2 brothers, I forget their names, but interesting story about them. But yeah, they heard the cries of this cosmonaut woman, they thought, speaking in Russian and burning alive. So like any major government entity, you're going to keep stuff a secret that you can't quite explain to your citizens.
Right. And obviously it's a bigger deal if there are casualties. So if you don't want much follow-up, maybe you shuttle those away, pay off victims' families, or just disappear them altogether.
Right.
That's all conjecture, by the way.
When it comes to the study that happened, there was a rocket launch at the same time, far away from the city. There was initial thought, could this have something to do with the rocket launch? So after they did this big investigation, they found before this rocket was even launched, so maybe in response to this thing, there were sightings of it traveling across the northern hemisphere. So after they did this study, they found that regardless of what it was, they were at least able to trace the route of the mysterious object almost without a gap. From 3:06 a.m., police officers in the Finnish capital, Helsinki, had reported sighting, quote, a bright ball of fire, which hovered over the airport for 4 minutes and then moved eastwards. This was also confirmed by the radar at the control tower of Helsinki Airport. A little later, an author 20 miles northwest of Petrozavodsk saw it through his telescope.
What is that?
He described the UFO as a lens-shaped object shining violet and surrounded by a shining ring. It had bright, pulsating rays of light coming out of it, quote, like tentacles of a medusa or jellyfish. At 3:30 a.m., a fisherman near Primorsk saw a bright light in the sky which was surrounded by a kind of haze. At 4 a.m., employees of an observatory, and it goes on, basically until it gets to the city.
A lot of different sightings so they can track it kind of moving in this direction.
Right, all describing this jelly-like...
That's not a failed rocket launch.
Right.
Is this the real photo, or is this an artist rendition?
Yeah, that's a real photo, John. Did you see that?
Whoa. Hold on, hold the phone. This is a supposed photo taken of the jellyfish.
That looks so fake.
Does it, John? Does it look fake?
It kind of looks like
It does. It looks very fake.
It does look like a painting, kind of, doesn't it? Are you sure that's a photograph?
Let me check. Reverse image search. Double check the origin.
I mean, it could just be a really old photograph.
Back when things used to look like paintings.
But when I was researching, I had done sufficient work to believe that it was a real photograph.
Yeah,
let me double check
your process,
because I want to make sure that it...
This Illuminati card game stuff looks pretty interesting.
Get out of there, John.
I'm just previewing.
No, dude. I want your reactions. Get out, please. I want your reactions. Chris has seen them already.
I'm getting bored over here.
Well, look at naked girls or something.
I don't like to do that.
Don't peek ahead at the content.
Read along with the story.
I lost place.
Because you should look at the screen. All right, from what I could tell, it's a real picture. But any listeners out there, double check. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's actually an image from this event.
Okay, it'll be in the show notes, guys. It'll under the Petrozavodsk incident.
Yeah, we'll also have some pretty other interesting photos in there. Now, what we can look at is the NASA video Did you want to look at that, John, or how you feeling over there?
I was waiting for this for a long time.
It's the big
God,
cherry on
with
top.
a preschooler.
Yeah, well, I've been sitting in my magic carpet square for an hour and a half. I'm ready for the fun.
Yeah, this is one thing I'm fascinated by, the Tether incident, and I'm fascinated by it for a lot of reasons. I tend to believe that space is not as we know it. I think that it is made
This
up
is
of...
Jeremy speaking, by the way.
Yes, thank you, clarification, Chris.
Clarification, Chris.
I mean, it's my personal belief. I don't know. I obviously admit that I don't know anything for sure.
You believe it or you're open-minded to it?
He has reservations about normal things.
I guess I'm open because I just disbelieve what we've been told about space, and there's a lot of compelling evidence to show that it's not what we think it is. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I just don't necessarily believe what NASA is telling us about it. I have a lot of reasons to be skeptical about what they say, but this video that came out is fascinating, supposedly from a shuttle or the ISS. I think it's a shuttle, isn't it?
I think it's the ISS.
Okay, but a tether breaks off, and it's a certain size, this tether, and as it floats away, these things start swarming around the tether. And if the size is true, what they're telling us about this thing, if they are up in this ether somehow, like, well, that's what I would say, but if they're up in space, if you're a regular person, they measure the tether, and then you can measure the size of these pulsing, glowing, amoeba-like, jellyfish-colored creatures. And these things, honestly, I believe, you look at these things up close, and then you look at stars up close in telescopes, and I think there is a connection personally. I think that stars aren't what we think they are, and when you look at those up close, it has the same kind of undulating, watery look to them.
Well, what's interesting, and stars aside, because it's the whole episode.
Sorry. Can of worms closed.
In this video, these things look just like how Trevor, James Constable, was describing his idea of these sorts of things, where he said that they were bio-life forms that enter a spectra of visible light, and they appear rapidly moving, pulsing.
Yeah.
And if you look at the images and you compare the images of these things around the tether and compare it to the infrared image that James Constable took, pretty similar if you're going to go with a shape.
Oh, so the black and white one here, we'll have in the show notes,
It looks like an amoeba.
Exactly. That's James Constable, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they would refer to these things as kind of like amoebas in the sky, like gigantic ones. And then the blue ones here in the picture are from NASA. Can we actually see the video?
Yeah, let's pull up the video.
We'll link this video in the show notes, guys.
3, 2, 1, play.
Columbia and the satellite now 77 nautical miles apart.
Oh, it's Columbia. Okay,
And
so we'll shuttle.
reporting that the crew can see the tether and see the satellite. That it's beautiful.
So there's this long rod-looking thing, which is the tether, and then all of a sudden these glowing things start to come out. They're illuminated by the sun, so that's why they're glowing. But you start to see they're moving in different directions, and
this view showing
swarming. They're all like kind of stopping as they're talking about it, because I think they're like, what is happening?
They're trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
I don't even know what we're looking
satellite.
That's the tether released from the shuttle.
Again, just moving into sunrise.
And it's supposed to be
It's
like
miles long.
Extremely long, which would make
81 nautical miles now from Columbia.
at. What are those things moving?
That's what we're talking about.
They don't know what any of that stuff is?
No, okay, later they say they think it's debris. But
the problem is sometimes
they're moving in different directions. They're stopping, they're changing direction.
and sometimes they move behind the tether.
Yeah.
It looks like what you would see in a bloodstream of a human being.
Yeah, doesn't it? It looks like an ether, like a liquid out there. I'm telling you guys, space is different.
But look at the shape of these things. They're these frisbee-like things moving at different speeds.
Like cells.
If it was debris, they would all.
Exactly.
If it was debris, it'd all be going in the same direction. I would have, or at least out the
And
same
it
direction.
seems to be moving incredibly fast.
Yeah,
But some are slow and some stop.
yeah, and some stop and then change direction.
But you said that thing's miles long?
Yeah,
So some of these things, if they're passing behind the tether, they would be
hundreds and hundreds of feet.
They like that one. They would be gigantic.
Yeah.
And they're moving like at hundreds of miles an hour.
Right.
What you're saying? Well, the long line is a tether, and
See that one going slow underneath it?
It's just, yeah, it's hovering.
Yes, they're calling it a debris right now. Look at that pulsing right there.
There's the pulsing one.
At such low angles, so there's a lot of stray light, and it's getting washed out quickly. But Claude is trying to do a quick, good
Another
job
pulsing
getting
one.
up in the cameras. Copy that.
Yeah, some are
Pretty
pulsing,
incredible.
some
I mean,
aren't.
I mean, what in the hell is this?
Right?
Description by the
This is
crew,
supposed to be space?
tether and the satellite.
I've never seen anything like this.
Look at that. Wait, okay, watch this one.
They're still attached to
Look at
it.
this guy,
Look
like
at
a
that guy.
beacon.
Columbia and the satellite to now.
It looks like biological
Life
microscopic organisms, but this is supposed to be on a much grander scale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And honestly, these
miles apart.
look a lot like stars close up when you look
What
at
are these people thinking? Like NASA, they're even commenting on
It's
this?
saying it's debris. Debris is
What
floating
kind
with
of
us.
debris looks like that?
I know.
And moves like that.
Close pass.
I mean, obviously
Columbia and the satellite.
their explanation for it would be,
That is a petri dish.
Look at that guy pulsing out his little. It's like he's procreating.
Look at that one.
He's pulsing his little belly.
Look at that.
Houston, that's a much better view.
He's like, meow, 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 meow.
It's a little Pac-Man with a tongue sticking out.
that's about
Meow, 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 meow,
3
meow,
minutes
meow.
into the video that we're laughing at right now, the little Pac-Man guy, little ping pong.
much wider strand.
That is not debris. That's an alive organism.
Oh, look, there's another one.
Yep.
It's just like the other
Pulsing,
one.
changing direction.
They're changing shape. They're changing.
There's
and
3 of them.
There's infrared images that James Trevor Constable's
That's
taken. It looks
supposed
just
to
like
be
that stuff.
space.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be. I'm not saying that it's not space necessarily, but what are these things around this tether? You know,
What is a tether?
a tether is a long cord.
Yeah, like to connect like the shuttle to something
And it
else.
got-
They released it
Why did they release
because
it?
they like to throw space junk out that might fall back to Earth.
It was heavy.
Should I stop it?
Yeah, do you want to stop the video? We can stop it.
Oh, it's when the alien comes out.
Oh, wait,
I'm just
wait,
kidding.
wait.
I'm kidding.
Just like, wait, what? But whether, if we can even trust that NASA's telling us the truth about this video.
That was a really strange video.
you ever seen that before?
no.
You see that it's the spacewalks when they do, and this, I know this is, put on your caps for a second and just consider. And I'm not saying that this isn't really in space or whatever space is, but
It doesn't feel like it to me.
right. So they do tests, right? Or they train astronauts underwater, right? They'll have complete replicas of the space station or whatever different aspects of what's up there. And they have astronauts down there doing their work in practice.
Right.
But there's been footage shown that I think is really compelling of the space station where they're supposedly doing a spacewalk, and behind them you can see someone just barely peeking through a porthole or going into a porthole with a scuba tank on. Like a diver, like support, like a cameraman.
Right. I mean, that's a whole episode.
I know
right?
what I'm saying is like there is an argument out there, because we should touch on it, because we do conspiracy, the idea that some of the stuff is filmed underwater and it's not real. Like the Mars footage is supposedly that might be actually filmed in Greenland.
Right. Yeah, definitely interesting ideas about,
Just falsified image. And we did the moon landing
doesn't
episode.
necessarily mean that space isn't real.
I'm not saying it's not real. You always say that. I'm just saying we don't necessarily know what it is.
Right. And if we can't get there, maybe we fake it sometimes.
Yeah. Or maybe
It's plausible.
Maybe we have got, I think some people that believe in the flat earth would consider that space is real. They're just not telling us what it is. And maybe we're up there in some kind of floating capacity in the firmament or something.
Maybe we are in the stomach of a giant sky whale. Maybe that's the universe.
Maybe it's all simulation on the back of a tortoise.
Could be.
It's all completely possible.
What do you guys think out there?
Am I crazy? This is Jeremy. I'm crazy. Go start Jeremy's Crazy Corner. Okay?
Jeremy's Crazy Corner.
And then you'll be safe, Chris, in your box of mainstream. Swim around.
How am I
Swim around
mainstream?
mainstream jellyfish.
Talking about sky beasts.
Yeah. Oh, so dangerous. So controversial.
I'm not mainstream.
I'm not.
I didn't know. I just like to keep things a little grounded, like not just
Grounded.
only look at one side of a conversation.
I'm not. But
I didn't say
if
you
you're
were.
afraid to talk, like if I mention, some different idea of space, you got to clarify.
No, but every time I mention anything, you're like, well, I do have to throw in the flat Earth theory here. We're talking
Because
about a star.
I'm so hesitant because you roll your eyes every time I mention something.
I didn't
that
roll my
you're
eyes.
afraid of.
Rolled your eyes.
When?
You practically rolled your whole body.
When did I roll my eyes?
No, not maybe directly rolled your eyes, but you rolled it
In my soul?
emotionally.
You'll either roll your eyes or you'll do that eye freeze where like you're seeing a bear or something and you're in danger and you're like, no, don't say it.
Anyway, are you done?
I'm done, guys. That was my little tirade. That will spurn our
I
next.
would say space is a very, very strange topic, and I don't think we know most of what's really happening.
It's a mysterious lover.
A mysterious lover indeed. And that's why we're talking about it in the Belief Hole.
Absolutely. This is a place for the weird, guys.
There are some things we didn't get to. I'll put things in the show notes, like this great image in the Aurora Borealis where a photographer had taken pictures and it looks just like in-color jellyfish in the sky. We'll post that in the show notes. We won't cover this, but it was in the news in 2010 because they're like, what is that? I mean, it's probably a satellite was their guess, but they're not sure. That looks just like
Jellyfish.
a jellyfish. Anyway, interesting stuff. I did want to say one last thing. A lot of you out there are familiar with Kenneth Arnold.
He coined the term flying saucer, right?
Yeah, he had that experience at Mount Rainier in Washington in the 1950s, I believe.
40s.
Was it the 40s or 50s?
This is before Roswell.
Right. Oh, yeah, 1940s, where he said he saw these saucer-like craft skipping over the water. But in the drawings, they look like manta ray.
Yeah.
So he got really into ufology after this experience. The rest of his life, he looked into this. So after years of looking into this stuff, he concluded the UFOs are living things. This is what Kenneth Arnold thought.
Really? You never hear that part of the story.
Because I think researchers brushed it under the rug because they weren't familiar with the idea, so they weren't comfortable with the idea. So when you hear things like the person who coined the term flying saucer believed that they were living things, he called them the fauna of the atmosphere. And he said, Arnold said that one pilot had told him that he was approached in flight by what he called a, quote, rayfish, larger than his plane, like a manta ray, and that the edges of its wings rippled like those of a manta ray. Like, that's crazy because you never hear that, because I think ufologists have kind of swept this whole idea under the rug.
Well, it could be both, too. It doesn't necessarily have to be one or the other.
Right.
That's what I mean. Yeah, I think it's a combination. I don't think everything a triangular metal-looking craft where you see portholes of people waving.
Yeah.
Like, that's obviously something other than...
I think it's easy to want to put everything into a single box, and obviously there could be different explanations for what we're seeing.
Which is why I think they scratched this.
It's just like the Bigfoot stuff. Could it possibly be connected to UFOs? Could it be something other dimensional or metaphysical? People in the Bigfoot community, a lot of them don't want to talk about that because it's not as clear cut. It's harder to understand and identify, and it's messy. They want a clean answer, and it's the same with the UFO and the biology of the atmospheric entities that might be up there. No, but that's interesting. This is Kenneth Arnold's actual sketches of what he saw.
Isn't that the guy from the Wonder Years?
Kenneth Arnold?
Yeah.
What's the matter, Arnold? You need another delivery of jock straps?
Okay, very funny, Panetti.
Fred Savage?
Isn't there?
Oh, like the kid's name?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Kenneth
Let me
Arnold.
Google
Doesn't
that.
it sound like...
This is important. Look this up. Yeah, I never saw his actual sketches. They look like manta rays. That reminds me, we didn't get to play that clip of that 1970s, I think it was 70s cartoon, John, Sky Whales.
Oh, yeah.
There's a scene where they're dragging this creature in the sky, and it looks like a gigantic manta ray floating. That's such a weird... Guys, I'm going to look at this show. We're not going to play it, but it is so bizarre and awesome. It's a science fiction short called Sky Whales, and it is bizarre, but it's awesome. Yeah, I would recommend it.
So at the end of this, I think it's definitely an interesting, huge topic that I never considered before. I heard about it a couple years ago, but didn't really start digging into it.
I didn't know
it
goes this deep. Yeah, we didn't have time to get too deep in the hole on this one. It is.
Yeah, we did. We went pretty deep.
We told some stories there, but there's a lot, obviously.
I mean, any of the topics we talk about, I feel like you could have like a week-long episode.
Yeah, maybe someday we'll do some parters.
Yeah, it's funny because people always ask it, what do you do? Oh, podcast or what's your topic? Oh, supernatural, paranormal, conspiracy. And they're like, aren't you going to run out of ideas? It's like, man,
the world is so weird.
If you only knew.
If you think the sky is big, 5 million times the Earth's oceans, dude. Yeah, this stuff goes on forever.
Dude. Yeah, dude.
The hole goes deep, guys.
So thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you for joining us on this dive into the Earth's atmosphere of newness.
Atmosphere of newness. Welcome.
Title for the episode.
No, thank you guys for checking it out. Hope you enjoyed our third episode of our second season. And,
welcome, new listeners. If you're new to the show.
If you're new to the show, thanks for checking us out, and we hope you dig it. Hope you dig the whole. Stick around, those of you who are patrons and have the expansion pack.
Not stick around. You have to.
Yeah. Well, you got to go there. Yeah. But
we got 2 stingers left to play too.
Okay. Before we say goodbye to you guys, we got a couple stingers we want to do. John, who we got?
We're gonna do Lauren B.
Okay. Yeah. If you guys sign up to be a Thunder Buzzard and get your custom stinger, just let us know if we can use your last name,
and also let us know if you want us to do it on something that you like, or just some information. Because
any information helps John come up with ideas for these. So
this is something
for Lauren.
For Lauren.
Thank you, Lauren.
Hello, Lauren B. I have been sent by the Belief Hole team to give you a warm thank you for signing up to be a patron.
I think Johnny 5 with a cold.
Patrons are very special people that have access to Belief Hole's extra shows. I know they are very, very grateful to Lauren for supporting the show and helping them grow to be able to reach more people. Yes, I wish I was a person that was special. Being a robot is hard, but I'm grateful that I have such wonderful masters. They are so smart and handsome. It makes my job a little easier.
Not wrong.
Maybe one day I'll become a real person and get to become a patron. Anyways, have a great 2020, Lauren. And I will now do my robot dance.
Oh, I want an animation to this.
Goodbye.
That was great, man.
That's great. I love the best part about that was that he still has to pay the people he works for to get their content.
I wish I could be real so I could be a patron.
Did you hear him when he says, so I could beget to become a patron?
He's just learning.
I said that accidentally
It's
wrong.
machine learning.
No, it was good. Thank you for getting that robot to do that, John. Did she like robots? Is that why you did it? Or was it just an idea?
She does now.
She does now. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. And we got one more. This one is for Angie C.
Oh, Angie C. Awesome. Okay.
She's been around for a long time. I think Lauren has too.
Yeah,
both of them.
We're catching up. A lot of these people signed up in
really
like June.
loyal patrons.
We thank you for sticking with us as we work through this backlog.
Yeah, thank you guys so much.
This one's a little more serious, but it wasn't supposed to be, but it came out.
Sounds serious?
It's a song.
Did you fall in love, John?
I feel like I fell in love with her when I wrote this.
Okay, let's hear it.
Angie,
Oh.
you are the best thing around.
It's a scripted.
You make the sun come up
And down.
Oh, that'll be good.
and go down.
Oh, there it is.
That's great.
Oh, yeah.
You took the time to get in the hole, and now we thank you and your beautiful soul.
Oh.
Hugs from your friends down in Belief Hole.
Nice. That's great. I got kind of the teary that made me want to start dating again.
It's very emotional.
I know. I usually try to cut emotions off in life, and you just totally took me by
You
surprise.
sound like you're going to cry, Chris.
It was a lot to hear. That was good. I liked it.
Hugs from your friends down in Belief Hole. I just picture, it reminds me of like,
Hugs from your friends.
it reminded me of like the season finale of Cheers. Like the bar's closing, like we're all down in the Belief
Sad.
Hole just like waving.
Hugs from
They're like we all died.
Yeah, we're in our hole. Thank you, Lauren.
was good.
Or no, thank you, Angie.
Angie.
Angie and Lauren, you guys
you.
are
Thank
Thank you
great.
for your long-lasting patronage.
Yeah.
Yes.
And anybody that wants to sign up and get an extra episode right now, right here
Do
on
it.
the Illuminati card game, predictive programming, all kinds of conspiracy.
And if you're already a expansion belief holer, head on over to Patreon, and the Illuminati will be waiting for you with a game to play.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, guys. We're going to get into some interesting stuff.
Cool.
Cool.
Anyways, guys, thank you so much
Thanks
for being
for hanging
here.
out with us today.
Hope you dug it.
Have a good 2020.
Watch the skies. Stay undercover.
Have a good 2020. Sounds like
I just mean have a good year since it's just starting.
have a good year with us because we'll be here with you.
2020, the year the sky creatures invaded.
Yes, thank you, Chris.
Or we all get perfect vision. Clarity.
Oh, I get it.
Well, that was good.
All right, guys, we will catch you next time on Belief Hole.
Down in Belief Hole.
Bye.
Bye.